The material submitted today is a comprehensive manuscript offering mindful parenting strategies for children with ADHD, with a particular focus on navigating the school environment and guiding educators. And let's look closely at the section discussing the academic environment, because the material makes a strong case for externalizing the system by highlighting the profound impact of executive function delays on learning. So let's dive right into how we can strengthen this approach.
Yeah, the foundational science and the compassion for the families here I mean, they're clearly established in these pages. So, since the material is exceptionally strong, we can just completely bypass the basic concepts today.
Right. We'll focus purely on high-level structural and strategic enhancements. So, looking at audience alignment, the current approach to navigating the school system heavily emphasizes what parents must demand, which may inadvertently position educators as obstacles rather than collaborative partners.
That's a really great point.
Because, the manuscript notes that helping kids with ADHD isn't a mandatory part of teacher education. So if the teacher genuinely isn't trained in executive function delays, doesn't the parent essentially have to step in and educate them? Like, otherwise the kid just falls behind.
Well, yeah, it is factually accurate that many teacher preparation programs lack deep clinical training on executive function. And the parent is undeniably the foremost expert on their own child.
Right.
But we have to look at the psychological mechanics of how that expertise is actually delivered. If the mandate given to parents is to, educate educators, we risk creating an adversarial dynamic right out of the gate.
Oh, for sure. Especially when you think about the modern school environment described in the text itself.
Exactly. Classrooms are moving toward large desk clusters, constant group work.
Experiential learning mandates.
Right, experiential learning. And those environments inherently demand much higher executive function from students than traditional rows of desks.
Yeah.
So the teachers managing these environments are already operating in a state of high cognitive load. They're juggling the varied needs of 30 different brains while navigating complex administrative policies.
Which is huge. So if a parent approaches that teacher with an instructional or demanding tone, essentially saying, I am here to educate you on my child's medical condition, that is highly likely to trigger a defensive response.
Absolutely. The teacher feels audited.
Yeah, they feel like a health inspector just walked into their restaurant with a clipboard scanning for violations in how they run their classroom.
I love that analogy, the health inspector.
Right? And when a professional feels audited, their walls go up and they stop listening to the underlying need. So what we really need here is a shift in the underlying metaphor of the relationship.
Okay, so how do we reframe that?
Instead of the parent acting as a health inspector, the manuscript should explicitly position the parent as a co-pilot. A co-pilot doesn't walk into the cockpit to critique the flying. They sit down, share the cognitive load, and monitor the instruments to help navigate the unique turbulence of that specific child's profile.
That is such a strong visual. And to make that shift actionable for the reader, we need to replace the combative tone with tools that explicitly reframe the parent-teacher dynamic as a joint problem-solving partnership.
Right, because if the goal is a partnership, we have to equip the parent with the exact language to initiate one.
So if I'm the author revising this, I need to put a communication tool right in the parent's hand. Maybe an opening email template?
Yes, something that starts off by acknowledging how overloaded the teacher is before asking for any accommodations.
Brilliant intervention. Let's think about the contrast here.
Okay.
A demanding email reads like a list of requirements, like, my son has ADHD, he needs extra time on tests, please ensure he sits at the front.
Which instantly puts the teacher on the defensive.
Exactly. But a co-pilot email changes the entire landscape. It could say something like, I know you are managing a large classroom and transitioning to some very complex experiential learning models this year.
And I want to partner with you to ensure my child's executive function delays don't disrupt your environment. Here is what works at home.
Yes! That completely disarms the teacher. It communicates, I see your stress, and I'm here to reduce it, not add to it.
Taking that a step further, if we're really talking about reducing the teacher's cognitive load, we should look at how medical information is transferred.
Oh, definitely.
Parents often overwhelm teachers by handing them a 20-page psychoeducational evaluation or a dense medical packet on the first day of school.
And physically, the teacher just does not have the time on a busy Tuesday morning before the bell rings to parse a dense clinical diagnostic report.
No, of course not.
It requires way too much effort to extract the practical classroom implications from a medical document.
Which means the book needs to do that extraction for them. The author could create a one-page teacher's guide.
Oh, like a printable tear-out?
Yeah, a tear-out or summary sheet at the very end of the chapter. A bulleted cheat sheet. It could highlight the child's specific executive function profile.
That's incredibly actionable.
Something highly targeted like hyper-focuses on independent reading but needs a 2-minute verbal warning for transitions to group work. It gives the teacher the exact instrument readings they need without the cognitive overload of reading a medical file.
This approach perfectly aligns with the manuscript's core philosophy of externalizing the system. We are externalizing the support system for the teacher, making it as easy as possible for them to succeed with the child.
Exactly. So once that collaborative bridge is successfully built outward with the school and teachers, the battlefront naturally shifts inward to the home, specifically the daily challenge of managing the homework routine.
The homework routine, the hardest part of the day for so many families.
Truly. And the section detailing homework routines offers a wealth of valuable interventions, but lacks a modular structure for parents who are currently in crisis mode.
That's a great observation.
The material correctly points out that parents of children with ADHD experience far higher levels of parenting stress and anxiety. Yet the text groups together immediate crisis management strategies, such as clearing the decks of a homework backlog and negotiating an amnesty, with long-term high-level habit-building strategies, like using a Sunday night calendar to teach time management.
Right. And we have to deeply empathize with the psychological state of our target audience here. Picture the parent sitting at the kitchen table. It's 8 p.m. The child is emotionally shutting down, tearing up a worksheet.
Digital notifications from missing assignments are just piling up into a deluge.
Exactly. The parent's own executive function is completely depleted by panic and fatigue at that point. If they open this book and read a continuous, dense block of text that blends emergency interventions with long-term calendar planning, it's just overwhelming.
It's the house on fire scenario.
The what?
The house on fire. Imagine handing a parent a dense textbook on installing a better long-term sprinkler system while their living room is actively burning down.
Wow, yeah. That's exactly what it feels like.
It requires too much executive function from a stressed parent to synthesize everything and figure out what to do tonight versus what to do next month. They just need to know how to use the fire extinguisher today.
This means the structure of the homework chapter needs a radical shift. It needs to be a tiered, step-by-step triage system.
Term skill-building phases.
So the book will allow overwhelmed parents to consume only the information they need to survive the immediate crisis, without feeling burdened by the long-term work until they are truly ready for it.
But how do we visually interrupt the reader to make sure they use it this way? I'm imagining a very stark, scannable graphic right at the start of the chapter.
Like a flowchart?
Or a triage checklist, formatted specifically for that mid-semester tipping point the text mentions, when the trickle of work has officially become an unmanageable deluge.
Yes, a box that literally says, "Are you in a crisis right now? Stop reading the rest of this chapter. Just do these 3 things today to stop the bleeding."
That visual break is crucial. And then we organize the surrounding text under clear, phased headings. So phase 1 could be immediate relief.
Okay, so this section exclusively covers the fire extinguisher methods?
Exactly. It would detail the exact steps to negotiate a one-time homework amnesty with the teacher and how to grant the child permission to step away from the desk without a battle.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second here. If I'm a parent reading phase 1, my immediate fear is going to be, wait, an amnesty? Am I just letting my kid off the hook?
Are they ever going to learn accountability if I just erase their past due work? Yeah, I can hear parents asking that.
That's a very common fear, and the text needs to address it head-on in phase 1. An amnesty isn't about letting a child off the hook. It's a neurological reset.
A neurological reset. I like that phrasing.
Right, because when a child with ADHD is buried under a mountain of past due work, their amygdala is firing constantly. They are in fight or flight mode. You cannot teach time management or accountability to a brain that is actively panicking.
So the amnesty clears the slate so the nervous system can regulate.
Exactly. Once the fire is out and the nervous system is calm, then the reader can move to phase 2, which is establish the baseline.
And that's where we introduce the structural basics, creating a minimalist workspace completely free of screens, implementing the use of visual timers to build basic 5-minute stamina blocks.
And only after that baseline is completely stable do we introduce phase 3, which would be scaffold the future.
Which is the exclusive home for the Sunday night calendar review, long-term project planning, and the transition of responsibility.
Breaking it down this way actually mirrors the stop mindfulness practice the author advocates for elsewhere in the manuscript. It forces the reader to pause, assess their current reality, and choose the most skillful, targeted intervention for the present moment, rather than being overwhelmed by the totality of the ADHD management journey.
I think stabilizing that daily homework routine is a massive short-term victory. But the ultimate test of all these systems comes when the timeline shifts forward. As the material rightly notes, the end goal is preparing the child for the high-stakes environment of high school, where the parental scaffolding must eventually come down.
Right. High school is the proving ground.
Exactly. But the discussion on high school planning accurately diagnoses the failure of open-ended support systems, but misses a crucial opportunity to outline how to gradually transfer agency to the teenager.
Yeah, the material makes a brilliant observation. Teenagers with ADHD often possess the executive function of a 10-year-old.
So true.
And if left to manage unstructured academic support or free periods, they will inevitably fail. Therefore, the text advocates that parents must step in heavily and schedule everything from extra help sessions to hiring an outside coach.
But I have a probing question here. Is there a risk that focusing solely on parental intervention in high schools, such as parents continuing to schedule everything, might overlook the crucial step of teaching self-advocacy? The text explains how to keep the teen afloat, but not how to hand them the oars before they reach adulthood.
The diagnosis of why teenagers fail in open environments is entirely accurate. The ADHD brain struggles with time blindness and reward delay, making unstructured time a trap.
Yeah.
But keeping a teenager afloat is entirely different from teaching them how to swim. If the sole focus is on parental intervention, with parents continuing to schedule everything for the high schooler, we are ignoring the vital mechanics of self-advocacy.
I mean, a high school senior is only months away from a college campus or a workplace, and those environments are completely devoid of parental scaffolding.
Exactly. If the parent is still managing the calendar and sending the emails to teachers during the spring of senior year, the adolescent hasn't developed their own effort management or task management skills.
They've just been passengers on a very organized train.
What a great way to put it. The material solves the immediate problem of high school failure, but inadvertently creates a long-term dependency.
So we need to introduce a scaffolded release framework specifically tailored for the high school years.
Yes, this section must explicitly map out how parents can slowly, methodically, and safely shift the executive function load from their own fully developed prefrontal cortex to the student's developing brain.
Let's brainstorm what that looks like practically on the page. We could outline a year-by-year progression plan. For example, using self-advocacy for extra help as the primary example.
Tracking it over 4 years provides a really clear roadmap. During freshman year, the parent does the heavy lifting. The parent directly emails the teacher to schedule the extra help session and ensures the teen attends.
Okay, and by sophomore year, the parent drafts the email, but the teen is the one who has to review it, log into their own account, and hit send.
Then, by junior year, the dynamic flips entirely. The teen has to draft the email themselves, and the parent merely acts as an editor, reviewing it for tone and clarity before the teen sends it out.
Finally, by senior year, the teen identifies the need for help, drafts the communication, and advocates for their own accommodations entirely independently.
That progression shows the reader exactly how the parental scaffolding is slowly dismantled. But we also have to address the reality of raising a teenager here.
Which is that teenagers naturally resist adult involvement.
Highly resisted. They want autonomy and they desperately want to fit in with their neurotypical peers. They don't want their parents nagging them to draft an email or set a timer.
They despise tracking tools and worksheets too. So if we suggest including a self-monitoring worksheet template for the teen, I can already hear parents saying, "My kid is never going to fill that out. It's just going to cause another fight."
Right, they hate nagging, yes, but they are actually fascinated by data about themselves.
Oh, wait, really?
Yeah, the key to the self-monitoring tool is positioning it not as a parent's compliance checklist,
but as an internal discovery mechanism.
Okay, I like where this is going.
The worksheet allows the student to track their own productivity and stress levels. For example, they can rate their stress on days when they use their external systems, like a daily planner or a visual timer, versus days when they try to wing it.
Oh, I see. It turns the teenager into a scientist studying their own brain. They aren't doing it because mom or dad said so. They are doing it because the data in front of them clearly shows that their homework takes half the time when they use the timer.
And that bridges the massive gap between a teenager's desire for independence and their neurological need for structure. By proving to themselves why their systems work, they develop internal motivation. The parent no longer has to be the daily enforcer.
That perfectly resolves the friction. So to briefly recap our critique today, this started by looking at the parent-teacher dynamic, suggesting a pivot from a demanding educational mandate to a collaborative, joint problem-solving partnership. We then examined the homework section, recommending that the advice be modularized into an accessible triage system to protect overwhelmed parents. Finally, we looked at the high school transition, advising the addition of a scaffolded release framework to ensure teenagers learn vital self-advocacy skills.
To put those structural changes into motion, the actionable suggestions are clear. Implement empathetic email templates and a one-page teacher guide. Restructure the homework chapter with a visual, phased triage checklist, and add a 4-year independence transition plan for teens. I warmly encourage the listener to implement these structural and strategic adjustments, meeting the reader exactly where they are.
And we invite the listener to submit their revised material back to the show for another critique in the future. We love seeing how a piece of work evolves. Thank you for listening.